Today's lesson is 10.2 histograms. It is on page 225 of your textbook. Our purpose today is to organize data by making a histogram so that you can answer questions regarding the data. Okay, so the key idea in today's lesson is, what is a histogram? A histogram is a bar graph that shows the frequency of data values in intervals of the same size. The height of the bar represents the frequency in the values in the interval. Now, frequency simply means how many times something occurs. So always along what would be considered the y-axis in a histogram, it's going to be labeled frequency. Now, there is really only one significant difference between a bar graph and a histogram. In a bar graph, your labels at the bottom of a graph are going to be one specific number. So, for example, this first column would say 0, second column 1, third column 2, and so forth. In a histogram, each of the bars represent a range of data. So, for example, everything in the first bar represents anything from 0 to 9 CDs. The second column is 10 to 19 CDs, and so on. So instead of just being one answer per column, there's going to be an interval. The intervals have to be the same size. So the first interval can't be 10 wide, the second one be 5 wide, the third one 5, the fourth one 8. They all have to be the same size. And in our histogram here, the size of the intervals are 10. Okay, so on our next page, we have making a histogram. Okay, now what we have on this page is a table of data. One side has the number of laps, the other side has frequency. Remember, frequency is simply how many times it occurs. Now, in the number of laps column, they have already broken our data up into intervals for us. And each interval is 3 wide. 1, 2, 3, there's a difference of 3. 4, 5, 6, a difference of 3. So it's in intervals of 3 already set up for us. So step 1 is going to be to draw and label the axis. Remember, with the x-axis and the y-axis. Frequency will always go on the y-axis. And then whatever your other topic is will go on the x-axis. So we've got number of laps and frequency. Frequency is always going to start at 0. But as you're going up on the y-axis, you can choose to count by what you want. It might be 2s, it might be 5s, it might be 10s, could be 1s. Depends on how spread out your data is. Then you go ahead and put the intervals on the y-axis. Now, the frequency determines how high up your bar goes. So in the section of 1 to 3, I'm going to go ahead and highlight that here for you. The section of 1 to 3, there is a frequency of 11 right here. So the bar goes up to 11. In the 4 to 6, the frequency is 4, so it goes up to the 4. Now, something important to note is once you start your intervals, you cannot skip any intervals. So you'll notice that 7 to 9 has a frequency of 0. So on down below in our bar graph where the 7 to 9 column should be, it is left empty. So make sure that in an interval with a frequency of 0, the bar height needs to be at 0. And then we go ahead and finish up the 10 to 12 interval and 13 to 15. Now, one other thing to notice about histograms is when you make the bars should be touching each other. There should not be a space or a gap. Now, over at the very beginning, over where 0 and 1 to 3 is, it's not a big deal if there's a tiny gap there. That doesn't matter. But once you start the bars, you'll notice that the 1 to 3 bar touches the 4 to 6. 4 to 6, of course, does not touch 7 to 9 because there is no frequency there. And then they finished up the graph with 10 to 12 and 13 to 15.